Greetings. Isn't today a great day to be a Pokemon trading card game fan? Today, I am bringing an updated list of one I made 2 weeks ago. Hops Lycanroc. Except today, I am not playing with the Lycanroc anymore. And I will explain why, so let's get into it. So here are my old and new lists side by side. The original vibe of the Lycanroc list was Zacian EX move damage counters, and Lycanroc benefited from this and can pretty easily take nice knockouts. I won't dive too deep into that. Go watch the other video if you care enough about the Lycanroc part. But the short of it is, I found out in this Dragapult, Gardevoir, and Monkey Dory heavy meta, the little bit of damage counters you put on your opponents don't stick around. So there's plenty of a time where the Lycanroc was set up, but I didn't get proper benefit from it because there weren't those damage counters to get a knockout. So it sucked, you know. Plenty of times I'd run into proper sequence and they'd Monkey Dory a couple damage counters off of something and boom, game lost. So I very quickly looked for a way to get rid of the Lycanroc. That's the main difference. Another big change, the first one I made actually, was adding Colress's Tenacity to my list. Quick reminder for those of you who don't branch out of meta decks very often, Colress's Tenacity allows you to search for Stadium and an energy card, reveal them, put them in your hand, and then shuffle your deck. It saw a dip in play when Kyurem and Regidrago V was pretty big, but I still think it's useful. Not enough decks run it to where you have to worry about Kyurem coming back. Unless Hop becomes 10% or higher meta share. I believe strong enough to do so, but that's neither here nor there. Colress's Tenacity is a great out for energies of any kind, so grabs for that jet, grabs for the metal if I need it, and a grab for that stadium, allowing greater consistency in my deck. Post-Wick, while not important all the time, is a pretty big piece here, and that comes in with that Hops Cramorant. Making the Hops Cramorant hit for 210, needing that Post-Wick in pit play is very important, because hitting those Fezes and those Maskogropons and the other 210 Pokemon we have prevalent in this era is what wins me games. It's the getting those nasty 2 prizes off of my mid-game 1 prize that a lot of the strength of this deck comes from. Now there are still Mew EX and Squawk and Petron EX. All of those have less than 210, and I can hit without, well, Petron's 190, so I would still need the Stadium to hit it. I digress. Stadium's pretty important. Another benefit of the Colress's Tenacity is it gives me more outs to my jet energy. Especially against setup decks, they love seeing my Snorlax and putting it to the active and thinking, oh, it's got full retreat. I want to Badoo him, and he ain't got nothing to counter me with. Well, jet energy, whether it's Ionoing into it, Professor's researching into it, or Colress's Tenacity into it, keeps me going. I don't lose a beat. It ignores Badoo, and I keep attacking, and that is just a great out that has, I believe, has added a lot of consistency to the list. So the 2 big changes so far, Lycanroc, Colress's Tenacity. So Colress's Tenacity is a big, technically my first big change, Lycanroc being the namesake one. A third in my most recent change, well, technically not a third change. Taking out the Lycanroc and replacing it with Archaludon EX is the biggest change to this deck that changes the effect of the deck, if you will. Originally, I was anti-Archaludon EX and Hops. The reason being, I knew the strength of this deck was the 1 prize game. If for mid and late game, you could choose and play to not have any 2 prizes on your board and be able to benefit off of this, giving you more turns and more chances to win, combo, and outplay, where these 2 prize decks and leaving Fez or other unnecessary 2 prizes on your board is how games are lost. And I still lose games unnecessarily throwing down Fez, unnecessarily throwing down Bloodmoon, them getting Gust and knocked, when otherwise I would be able to outplay using the Cram Snorlax combos and sequencing. When I went to cut Lycanroc, I put Archaludon EX in, and I've been playing with it since, because most importantly, Archaludon gives you an out to Brave Slash. It's nice as a big, meaty attacker that hits for 220, but it's the out to Brave Slash that really has allowed my output to be raised, because before, the strongest attack I had in this deck was Bloodmoon, and 240 doesn't one-hit KO everything in the format. But Brave Slash can, if I have all the combos I need for it, a Snorlax on the bench, Hop Span, and the Post Wake, and play that 330, most of the time surprise attack, which they can guess if you have Duraludon on your bench, but it is hard for them to predict, and I'll explain in a minute, but can come out of nowhere. But those are my biggest changes. I did take out the Wooloo double, and the reason why also coincides with the Rock change is 70 HP guys on your bench is another way I'd lose games, because 3 Monkey Dory attacks, even if they're not using that damage to help win other knockouts, 3 casual Monkey Dory movements, that's an extra prize. That can be the difference between a win and a loss, and I have lost several games that way. I threw the Wooloo down thinking I'd use it. It doesn't get used. It's an easy 1 prize. Same thing with that Rockruff, so I removed them. The latest and last change I made was getting rid of Maractus. I played it in this Archaludon EX build for a bit, but I found that it was a last minute use. Like, if nothing else was working, it would work. Then I realized if that was the backup, it was putting me in situations I didn't need to be in by not playing it, and the ability isn't useful if it's not being backed by a Lycanroc. So I cut it for a second boss, and I'll get more into that in a second, but that was useful for other reasons. But let's stop staring at deck lists. Let's look at the deck flow. Usually I have a nicely set up all of the cards and I just bring copies in, but I just kind of brought all the cards in and set them out. So no, these cards down here are not accurate representations of all the cards in the deck, because they're scattered and I've made some copies. But what we're looking at here is what I would call the flow of the deck and how my games generally go, or at least this is how I attempt to make the games go. Odds are you have an Arven in hand, you have Iono, you have enough draw to get this situation. I like leading with the Zacian EX to hit consistently 90, or I said 60 here. Very, very rarely can I only hit with that 30. The vast majority of the time I have the Snorlax Stadium or Band in hand to hit to the 60, and it tops out at 120 for that first attack of the game. This often looks like starting with the Cram or putting a Fez, depending on what it forces you to start with. Then you playing Arven for a Hops bag to grab that Zacian and Snorlax in hand, and then grabbing that Hops Choice Band. Then playing 6, 7, 10 energy, you have a 1 in 6 chance of having an energy in hand at any given time. You attach it to the Cram or whatever, retreat it, good to go. The Iron Bundle's the same way, 1 retreat cost. I very, very consistently can lead an attack with Zacian EX and throw 30 damage on to something that I know I need to knock out later. This might be I'm playing against a setup deck that has the 70 HP basics. I know that. So whether it's putting on the Zora that I know is about to turn into a harder to knock out Zoroark, routes into Gardevoir, Dracloak into Dragapult, etc., or Dreepy into Dragcloak, etc. And in other situations, you're softening something up that you're going to have trouble knocking out later. This is Raging Bolts, Terra, Trapagos, the Pokemon that are more than 210 that you want to bring into Cram's knockout range. Now, the downside is Monkey Dory is heavily played, and this is very often being put back onto you in a Dragapult game. It's being put back on the Zacian EX to follow up a 200 attack for a knockout, which kind of sucks, but that isn't a deal breaker, and I'll explain why. Another big thing is they'll start stacking it on the Snorlax. So if you try to swing with it later, it knocks itself out and can affect your prize trade. But even that's not terrible as an outcome, but just something to think about. Or there's not a way to turn that off that I know of, but it's sad side effect, but I'll take it. Because very often I've won less with Gardevoir, more with Dragapult. There's plenty of Dragapult games I've won by Arven prime catching their one Dreepy, knocking it out, and then turning into a dead game on their side, and me just Zacian, cram, win. I can do that with Gardevoir too, but they have more outs and can play a bit better around that. Another cool thing is I love having Iron Bundle on this list. What both Gardevoir and Dragapult like doing, and I'm going to mention those two a lot because they're the big meta contenders, what they like doing is playing with Artisan. They use it to bump your post weight, and they think, haha, I now have more consistent setup. I'm using it to put another Routes in play, another Dreepy in play. Now I'm doing you. That sucks. With the Iron Bundle in here, I use that Artisan to grab it, not an item, put it in play, tell that bundle to go on the bench, forcing them to bring up a Routes or Dreepy. Easy 2 prize turn. I'm winning that game most of the time I do this. So great little tech. And sometimes I just want to hit that 120 into something different if they're pushing me something like a Mimikyu. Love Iron Bundle in this list. So my goal first turn is bring out that Zacian EX, put a Snorlax on the bench, and then start thinking about the future, aka putting a Cram down, putting 2 Crams down, eventually benching a Duraludon, etc. If it's a Monkey Dory deck, wait to put down a second Cram, because they will try to boss knock it if they think it's going to get turned on, especially if you're attaching tools super early, but you kind of get a feel for when and when not to do that the more you play with the deck. So that's first turn. Second, third turn, if they don't knock out your Zacian, you're Zacianing. You're not getting knockouts, so they're not getting benefit from the Fez, but you're 2 hitting smaller 2 prizers, you're 3 hitting big 3 prizers, especially if they're struggling the setup. You're just Zacian EX just eats early game. It's great. Then if you want them to knock out the Zacian because they can't really ignore it. Once they take that first 2 prizes, you push up a Cram and you start swinging that technically base 120, most of the time that 150 to 210, because that's mid game. You have had way more chances to get all of your combos going. That 210 attack, especially if you have some Gust in hand, does numbers. You're 2 hitting everything in the format. You're finishing a KO that a Zacian starts. So if a full Zacian followed by a full Cram is a 120 plus 210, that's a 330. So you're 2 hitting things that way. If they set up early and they Dragapult knock you out, I swear this deck is like an anti-Dragapult deck. It's great. And then even if it's not Zacian into Guts Knock Fez, Guts Knock Mew EX, or half knock, 4 prize game right here. Very consistently doing that. It's great. Something to be doing while you're using these easy to attack with Crams is you are casually putting a Duraludon down on the bench and you're attaching an energy to your Snorlax if you can. Sometimes you need it to attack with the Cram, but the goal is to have energy on the Snorlax, and if possible, have an energy on a Cram that you have hanging out. And here's the why. Over benching or over attaching with your Hop's Choice bands means you run out of them, and they are the bigger target for Gust knock plays. The second reason being, having a random energy on a Cram allows you to retreat in something. So your better opponents will try to play around the Crams, aka Gust knock a Fez, Gust knock a second Zacian, and try to prevent you from using those Crams, because that's where a lot of your strength's at. But if you have a Cram in the active and then no energies or ways to switch into like your backup attackers, which we'll get into in a second, you can stall yourself out and it's not a great time, especially if you're like me and you get too excited and use your Prime Catcher super early in the game to get those nasty GP knockouts, and your opponent has found a way out of that. So there's things to consider. There's situations when you want an energy on a Cram, and there's situations where you want an energy on a Snorlax. The Snorlax is because while you're not retreating with it, you are setting yourself up for another turn, energy for hands, and attaching a band for a 230 knock, which the 2 extra damage counters compared to that Cram 210 is, I'm not going to say super important, but that does help you in the big 2 prize deck turns. So if like a Trap goes, for example, or Raging Bolt, those numbers just help sometimes. But most of the time, it's just what you need to finish out a 2 prize, a bigger 2 prize that the Cram started. But it's a threat, and it helps you not get to the 2 prizes left on your opponent's side, and your Cram attacks are turned off, and you feel really bad if you don't have a backup attacker after that. So looking at it kind of macro, they take 2 prizes here, you get your 2 to 4 prizes from this direction into the use of 2 Crams, and the big thing is how you get your last 2 prizes. And that's where some of the better plays, some of your better skill expression will appear. The easy answer is Bloodmoon Gust, Bloodmoon Push, finish a knockout, win. Super easy. Usually it's an energy attachment, Colress, Jet Energy, Bloodmoon wins me games. Same thing with the Snorlax, push the Snorlax, attach return, bands, 230, wins games. It doesn't always work like that. Again, Dragon Ball Gardevoir, they're a little bit too much health than what the Moon or the Snorlax will bring, thus the strength of having the Archaludon EX. Yes, setting up the Duraludon is technically a backup attacker. Evolve, put 2 Metal Energy onto it, attach return, push, 210 attack, great. Same issue, that has the same issue as the Snorlax and the Bloodmoon though. 210's not super strong. The reason why it's here is the Brave Slash Zacian EX. Except that is the most combo heavy part of the deck, and you have to plan for it. Because what you need is a Duraludon in play, access to Archaludon EX, 2 Metal Energy in the discard, an energy in hand, Hop Choice Band in hand, or get the Zacian EX into the active. So if saying each of those things out doesn't sound too bad because they're all normal gameplay states to be in, but missing one of them means you don't have Brave Slash and it feels bad. So let me dig into it further. This Zacian EX needs 3 Metal Energy and a colorless. The band accounts for the colorless. The Archaludon EX accounts for 2 of the metal, and 1 metal from hand accounts for the 3rd Brave Slash. You can do what we did with Snorlax and preemptively bench a Zacian and attach Metal Energy to it. But in the late gameplay, all it takes is a Gust knock. 230 is pretty easy to get for most of these decks, so you don't want to give them a free win. If you even think there's a chance they can Gust knock it, depending on their situation. So let's assume that is something you can't do. I've won games that way. Let's assume that's something you can't do. That's why it's important to have a Fez or a Cram, most of the time a Cram, or even the Iron Bundle with the energy attached to it from earlier in the game. The extra kind of nice thing about them targeting your Crams with your tools is they're more likely to ignore your Cram with an energy on it if they're playing around your prize trade, which means for your last 2 prizes, you can push the Cram. That's how you get your Zacian in play. Play the Zacian. Maybe you play your Arven to get your tool. Maybe you play your Colress to get that energy you need. But however it is, well, I digress. Whether it's playing your Arven, that gets you your Ultra Ball band, so you Ultra Ball Duraludon, attach return, blah blah blah, Brave Slash. Pretty consistent, well, pretty easy if it runs out that way, but you don't always have the Arven, you don't always have the band. I'm not saying it's an impossible combo. If it was hard, super hard of a combo, I wouldn't play it. But it is the one part of the deck that you have to plan for the most. Being able to use that Brave Slash and get that last 2 prizes for a game. I did make a couple notes for myself. I pretty much talked about all these things, but these numbers kind of represent the prize trade I was referring to. Zacian EX damage, Cram 1, Cram 2, Snorlax, Bloodmoon, or Brave Slash. So if your brain likes these numbers better, that's the thing to look at. Or combos to be aware of. To get that Cram, you need all of Hop's pieces in play, which is obvious when I say it out loud, but when you're playing, you gotta, it's hard. Sometimes it is hard to get all through those pieces in and drastically change your gameplay. I have lost games when I forget that the stadium's been bumped and I attempt to knock out a Fez and I don't, and then they just retreat and keep attacking, and that really throws me off for a game. So knowing whether or not you can pull off the 210 Cram when you think you can or not is fairly important in my opinion. Swinging with the swing snore, as I said, is that it's the important thing is having that energy attached to turn before, because there is no way to get multiple energy attached at the same time on the Snorlax. And then Brave Slash, like I explained, you need to have a retreat element, a energy for turn, the Archaludon ready, and a band in hand. That's a 4-piece combo that you can plan for, but if you don't have it, you don't have your Brave Slash. So now I will leave my video here and turn it back to you. Do you like Archaludon EX in this list? With the combos I have spelled out, are there better ways to achieve them or more consistency? I brought up that retreating is an issue, moving the pieces around. With my play, I think I've covered that with the jet energy and the energy for retreaters. But if you think that the Brave Slash fails too often because of it, what do? Do I add a rescue board? I don't think I do, but that is a way to do it. Does Chorus Tenacity open you up to Kyurem issues? Do I play too many or too few of any of these pieces? I don't know. I would like you to take this list, play it, and find out why Zacian is one of the better decks in this format, and it consistently beats a lot of those meta decks, especially that top Dragapult and Gardevoir matchups. So go and try it. Let me know how it goes. And with that, have a good night.